welcome to NTWC Plus. Glad to have you along today. My name is Tim Smith, Chief Meteorologist at KRGV TV in Deep South Texas. That's McAllen, Brownsville, South Padre Island. Somewhere in the background, Alex Garcia is here. You might hear his voice today. Might even see Alex today because Dr. Hal and Bill are they're both traveling somewhere. They're not together, but they're traveling somewhere, so they're not going to be joining us today. So we're going to carry the show, and Alex may jump in from time to time. Our program today is going to be really interesting, I think. You've heard of IBHS, and if you haven't, we'll explain what that is and talk to Alex here in just a little bit, Alex Cary, about what they're all about, what they're doing, the information we can literally take home to make our homes and businesses safer and more resilient for any approaching storm. Before we get to that, though, let's thank our sponsors who are here once again today. They all work with us week in and week out, year after year, to help make these programs and the National Tropical Weather Conference a possibility. First and foremost, USAA. They've been part of our program from the very beginning, and we sincerely appreciate their support each and every day. The South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, they're the hosts of the National Tropical Weather Conference. We'll be back there in April of 2026. We invite you to join us in person and learn all these great things we talk about in these programs each week in person and meet the people behind the scenes. The Weather Company, Weather Boy, and Live View, all folks who are an integral part of what we do at the National Tropical Weather Conference and NTWC Plus as well. So we thank all of them, and if you have any reason to do business with them, we encourage you to do so because they are great folks. All right, our guest today, we're going to talk about IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business, Home, and Home Safety. Alexandra Cary is our guest. She's the Fortified Market Development Manager at I'm going to read out the whole thing, Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, providing communities across the Gulf Coast and nationally with a dedicated expert collaborating with active and potential Fortified program participants to bring sustainable and resilient construction practices into vulnerable communities. Alex has worked in the home building industry for over 20 years and is now involved in leadership roles at the local, state, and national level, including as an NAHB national delegate. Alex is a licensed home builder in Alabama and recently completed construction on her own fortified gold home. Good morning, Alex, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you on today. First of all, where are you coming to us from?
Yeah, so I'm in Fairhope, Alabama. I'm in my fortified gold home here.
In your fortified, so if anything happens during the show, the home will still be there.
That's right. I'm still going to be here.
Folks are not moving. Where's Fairhope, Alabama? What part of the state is it?
So it's a Gulf Coast, so it's pretty close to Mobile.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, let's talk a little bit about first just IBHS in general, because a lot of us have heard of it. A lot of folks have an idea what it is, but why don't you just give us kind of a background of what IBHS is?
Yeah, sure thing. So we are, as our name implies, we're funded 100% by the property insurance and reinsurance industry. So we are a 501c nonprofit. We are a research and communications organization. So we have a facility in Richburg, South Carolina, where we can move in full-scale structures. We have 105 fans there that can blow up to 130 mile per hour winds, and we can introduce 8 inches of rain into that wind stream. We can introduce embers from wildfire into that wind stream and see how they all interact with the built environment. Do a lot of research in the field as well. So with both of those things, we've learned a lot of ways to reduce the kind of losses that we see after all of these numbers of disasters that are in the news each and every day, and what you guys are so familiar with. There's some small things that can make a very big difference, a little bit above code. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but our whole mission is to reduce the losses that we see each and every day, not just for our members that fund us, but for communities as a whole, businesses, homeowners, everyone.
Give us a little bit of the history. Go back to where this got started, because obviously there's a need for it to provide better resilience, but give us a little bit of the history.
Yeah, so we're many decades old. We're about 40 plus years old now. Our research center's only been around 15 years. That was a huge fundraising effort about 15 years ago, or more than that, probably about 18, 20 years ago, where they really wanted to be able to provide some real world testing. There's a lot of labs out there that can do smaller scale, lots of very famous wind tunnels that do great work, but we really wanted to do something that was on that broader scale and on bigger buildings to see what we could achieve there and gain data points that no one else had. So this is, we actually, I should mention too, we do a lot of hail research, lots of roof research, because roofs are the thing that insurers pay the most for. Every year they purchase more shingles than anybody else does. And that's because they're constantly replacing roofs. So a lot of that, we do a lot of research on how we can reduce roof damage and on shingle performance and that kind of thing. So yeah, some really valuable stuff over that last 15-year period we've been operating.
I've seen some of the pictures on the website of the facility, and I wanted to drive by and see it sometime. But talk about the facility itself. It looks like it's a pretty amazing place.
Yes, absolutely. And the one that everyone sees, we have a lot of great clips that come directly out of that what our research chamber. And again, as I mentioned, 105 fans create up 130 mile per hour winds. We can fit. We've not maxed it out in this way, but it's large enough just to give you some scale where we can literally fit 9 two-story homes into that main chamber. We don't max it out in that way. I think the most we usually do is like a comparison with one or two homes is what you'll most likely see on a lot of our videos. But we have really incredible capabilities there. We've created indoor hailstorms. We've created hurricane. We can take like a swath of storm data and plug that into our computers and literally duplicate those same conditions in the lab, at least up to 130 miles per hour. We do a lot of, we have a lot of periphery labs where we do smaller scale stuff. So we have a hail cannon where we can subject shingles, impact rated shingles, to direct hail impact with ice balls, which is not the traditional hail test. The original test was done with steel balls. So ice balls do very different damage, and thank goodness steel balls don't fall from the sky. So we do a lot of that. As well as we actually have one fan that can create winds up to 180 miles per hour. We can really test, the wind resistance and the seal of shingles. So we do a lot of that kind of side stuff, and it's not always the super sexy stuff that you see in the main test chamber. There's a lot of other things going on all the time.
So talk about what it's like inside there. What's the process when you're testing a home next to another home or something? There's some time involved in that. Kind of step us through that.
Yeah, there is. And we have a whole team of folks that all they do is construct these things that we blow apart. We have instrumentation folks that put in, sensors, thousands of sensors into these homes to be able to gather that data. We have data crunchers that are, out there that once that data comes to us through all those sensors and all these tests, they're, really analyzing all of this stuff. So there's so many people, so many support people that play a role in this. And yes, planned sometimes years in advance as far as what, some of our members actually dictate what are they want to see, what data do they want, and so that they play a role in what we are testing in that facility. And then with that, we have to build all those things and we move them in and before we even start to subject, there's hundreds of hours of work that go into a lot of these tests before even the wind blows.
You mentioned members. Who are these members? Who are the people that make this a possibility and that want to see the data?
Yeah, so the members, as I mentioned, we're funded by the insurance and reinsurance industry. So we've got about, I think, 80-90% of the private insurers that are out there pay dues to us. So and all of those dues go into funding the research and the programs that we manage.
So I want to see this happen. Are there on the website? Are there videos of homes blown apart, things like that?
Absolutely. We have a Vimeo channel, and there's all sorts of good stuff on there. We've got a website, ibhs.org, and then as well as we'll talk a little bit more about Fortified later, I'm sure. And we've got another website dedicated to the programs, both on the Fortified and wind front, but also on the wildfire front. So we've got a lot of good stuff out there for folks to access.
So where are we right now? What are we learning right now? What's the latest in what's coming out of your research?
So a lot of the focus, and as you might imagine, has been wildfire. So we've done quite a bit of wildfire testing with embers, and also like building to building transfer, where we'll set an accessory dwelling unit on fire and see how that affects the nearest structures and things like that, and what kind of, what can we do to prevent those types of things. So a lot of our focus lately has been that in the main chamber. Again, as I mentioned, we're doing a whole lot of other stuff on the outside with the roof research and shingle research in particular.
What kinds of things have come out of the research that you've done that are maybe becoming common practice, but certainly for fortified homes, which we will talk about more in depth in a moment. But what kind of things have we?
Yeah. So we really, on both the fire and the fortified front, we've really found some really very small things that are very cost effective that can make a very big difference in home performance. And we needed them to be in some sort of a deliverable form so that it made it easy for homeowners and contractors to be able to utilize that. And as they're either rebuilding or re-roofing, or building, period, new construction projects. So that's where Fortified kind of was born, is we put all of those little things into a package, a standard called Fortified, where it makes it very, very easy, and all of it is just free to the public. Those standards are live on our website, fortifiedhome.org, and anyone can access them and utilize them.
Well, you were talking about the variety of hazards, if you will. So has it always been an all hazards approach, or is that something that's come with the recent wildfires and things like that have really made it that's become more important?
Yeah, so we did start with the Fortified program, and it was a little bit of a different version when it first came out, and when I was first introduced to it about 15 years ago. We did not initially have a wildfire program, but because those losses had continued to increase, and we really had found things in our research that we knew we could identify and also provide a deliverable standard for folks in those high hazard risks for wildfire. That was, forgive me, I don't recall the year, but it came out a good bit later than Fortified. It's been within the last, I think, 5 years that has come out. And we've been able to, start affecting folks out, especially out in the West Coast that are struggling so much right now with the huge losses.
That's been huge up and down the West Coast. Yeah. We have the website. We can show you that. We'll put that up there for the viewers to see real quickly so you can see ibhs.org. There it is. And a lot of information on there as you take a look at that, the different types of research and insights that are available. Maybe you can touch on this, just what all is available on the website while we're looking at it.
Yeah, so you'll see, and this is the part that, the member exclusive, that is actually for our insurance members to access. So that part is not accessible to the public. However, you see there's a number of tabs there at the top where we do talk about some of our research, and we do talk about a lot of other things that the general public can access. We've got some, we'll talk a little bit about this, but we've got hurricane ready guides. We've got cold weather ready guides. We've got, tornado season and thunderstorm ready guides. So we have a lot of guides for homeowners to use that'll help them prepare as, if they're looking to make their homes more resistant, if they're in an existing home, or if they're building soon, a lot of good data there of what they can do to reduce, to make their home as strong as possible and most resistant to these hazards.
That's really important. I was looking through the website and looking for fortified builders in my area, and sure enough, when I went to Texas, the third or fourth one that came up was about 3 blocks from where I live, which was encouraging.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we've seen a lot of growth especially in the last couple, 2-3 years. We've seen the significant growth. I think a lot of it fueled by some of the more recent disasters, a lot of it fueled by some of the, insurance challenges that are happening in a growing number of states where, insurers are having to respond, because when they have to replace things over and over, that's a big risk for them, and they want to reduce losses. So they've been encouraging, they've been getting even more involved in getting folks to participate on the ground in some of these programs, which has been great.
Let's get into that fortified discussion a little bit, because there's a lot of questions I want to ask about that as well. Start with the fortified homes in general, because there's several layers of that. But what is that?
Yeah, so Fortified, as I mentioned, it's a standard that we developed that's come out of our wind and winter and rain research. It's a voluntary standard, so it is, you may see pieces of it ultimately end up in code, but sometimes code's a little bit behind the science. And so this is something everyone can use now. Very minor upgrades above maybe what traditional code is in some of these areas. And it really, again, it's addressing little things that can make a home much more resistant and better able to withstand winds and wind-driven rain in hurricane areas. And then in inland areas, severe convective storm, we have a high wind program. So we have a hurricane and high wind. High winds looking at lower level tornadoes, the periphery even of larger tornadoes, preventing the kind of damage, in particular roof damage, that we see. So it is broken into three parts. There is a third-party verification piece, which is key. And we can talk about a study that was done recently that really highlighted that for us. But it all starts with the roof. We know that is the first line of defense. It is the quickest thing to be damaged, even in lower level wind events, as little as 60 miles per hour, you can start losing shingles. And then once you lose your shingles, historically, there's not a lot of protection under there. And so we've got what we call a sealed roof deck, where we're sealing up the seams in your roof deck. Simple, low cost thing that can prevent water from coming in when you lose your roof cover, when you lose shingles. Also nailing down that roof deck. Like if you have an existing home, adding ring shank nails when you are re-roofing, that makes it doubles the strength of the attachment of that roof deck. So you've gotten your deck attached better, you've gotten your deck sealed, and then we look at sort of locking in the edges to make sure that your roof has the best chances possible, because those edges are super vulnerable and can cause sort of a cascading effect up the roof if wind and water gets in that edge. So roof really starts with the roof. That it just so happens too that it's the least inspected, even though it is the most quick to be damaged. There's a lot of communities that do not have roof inspections from even when there are good codes. So, that's a big problem.
So if you're building a new home, or if you're putting a new roof on, or you've had some hail damage, you got to get a new roof as it is. Yep. These are all things that can be retrofitted, if not added, when it's new.
Absolutely. And we do have a growing number of retrofit programs. I should also mention that, because you did bring up the hail damage, we do have, for the roof cover itself, as I mentioned, we've done quite a bit of research on hail. And so we have our own list of good and excellent impact rated shingles. And we require for Fortified that you actually make sure that you're using one of those products that we've tested and deemed good or excellent, because we know that performance is going to be better than some of the alternatives. And that's just for shingles. There are other ways to get in the impact testing for, say, metal or tile. Those still stand. So we'll honor those, but we do want to make sure the shingles have that better rating.
Besides the inconvenience of losing a roof and everything that comes with that, are there benefits to my insurance? If I do, obviously that's where this all comes from. Are there benefits to my insurance policy when it comes to renewing if I put a fortified roof on?
In some places. So some states have actually passed legislation requiring that insurers provide discounts for a fortified roof or a fortified at any level. We have seen, so some states are doing that, and we've seen a lot of growth come out of that. There are other states where maybe there's not a state mandate, but insurers are doing that voluntarily. And so they're offering credits when it's not a mandate. The other piece is sometimes it's less about credits and just about availability at all, or whether a home is insurable at all. We have, there are states in your own, coastal areas of Texas where you cannot get insurance if you are except from the wind pool, that insurance wind pool along the coast there. It's called TWIA, of course. And Fortified, we've seen just the market reflect that if someone builds Fortified Gold, they can get other insurance. They have way more opportunity to get better coverage and through the private market. So that's another thing we've just seen as far as a market reaction to Fortified in some of these places.
You mentioned Fortified Gold. Talk about the other levels of Fortified beyond the basic.
Yeah, sure thing. So again, starting with the roof, it does build, each level builds off the other. So every fortified home will have a fortified roof, regardless of the other levels. Fortified Silver, we're getting into addressing what we call damage amplifiers. And what that means is that if that component is damaged, it can cause a lot more damage. One of the prime examples I'll use is a garage door, making sure that it's pressure rated, because garage doors are a very significant opening. And so when a garage door is damaged or if it gets blown in or sucked out or whatever, that basically the house can pressurize like a balloon. And of course, a house is not designed like a balloon to expand. So it literally can cause catastrophic destruction just from a garage door failing. So that's a big one that, and that's also something that particularly people in high wind areas that are more vulnerable to tornadoes or hurricanes, that's another retrofit that can be done. So if somebody's looking to get a new garage door, make sure it's pressure rated, because that can make all the difference for your home, literally the home surviving in some instances, if that door can hold fast. That's an example. There are other things like porches and carports that are attached to the house, because again, if they're damaged, they can cause a lot more damage to the main roof structure or other things. So those are the types of things we're addressing there. And then in hurricane prone areas, making sure that there's impact protection, right? So hurricane shutters are the most common, or a window that has impact, that is impact rated. Those are two options. You don't need both, just one or the other, to make sure that you've protected your openings from impacts that, when debris is flying around in hurricane prone areas. So that's the silver level. The gold level, primarily going to be something we see most with new construction. And the main reason for that is that one we're addressing, the biggest portion of that is what we call a continuous load path. So that means that the roof is tied to the walls are tied to the foundation, and the foundation, the whole house is anchored to that foundation, so that when the wind blows, all of those loads are sort of tied into the ground, and that home can stand strong. So I mentioned, garage door failure. If you've got that load path, even when you have a breach, in most cases, you're still going to have that home standing strong, because you've got that load path that's tying everything together, so the wind can't tear it apart. That's the biggest piece of that level. There's some other smaller things like design pressure for windows and whatnot. But why that's primarily for new construction is that, remember I mentioned earlier that documentation piece, or in that third-party verification piece, and a lot of that involves documentation in the form of photos and other things. So we're not taking for granted, code, a lot of cases, they're just checking some boxes to verify things are done. We actually collect photographs, we collect material information. So that's not easy to do with a home that has already got like drywall over the walls. A lot of that stuff you can't see because it's hiding back there, doing its thing, but it's not, we can't document it. So we tend not to see a lot of existing homes get to that level unless they're like full gut rehabs, where somebody's actually getting down to the studs and an engineer can design that load path.
So somebody's getting ready to build a new home and they want it to be a fortified home. Can they just go to a checklist on the website, or do they have to hire a fortified, certified builder type of thing? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that the website's a great place to look first, just to see if there's any builders in your area that are already doing this, because they're much more familiar with the program. The job will go much more smoothly and you have a higher success rate of getting a fortified designation at the end of the project. That said, it is for builders generally the standards are there, and yes, we do have checklists. Yes, we have ways for them to utilize the standard that they don't necessarily have to be certified. That said, we have shifted, much in the way of code does. We upgrade our standard every 3 to 4 years, some to keep up with code and make sure that we're consistent. Others might be that we've discovered something in our research that is important enough that we want to incorporate it into the standard. With that, this year, we are starting in November of 2025, we're going to start enforcing our new standard. And with that comes, we're going to require that every single fortified roof is installed by a fortified certified roofer. So the roofers have to be trained even when the builders don't necessarily need to be trained. So that's a shift for us, and that's a new requirement for the standard. We try to make it easy. All of it's online, so roofers can get on there and get trained. Contractors can get on there and get trained. Even our third-party verifiers, evaluators can get trained. All of it online. So we try to make it as easy as possible, eliminate hurdles.
I was looking at the map. Are most of your certified builders and roofers in coastal communities, or do you extend well inland and of course into the tornado belt and hail zone? like that?
We're seeing a very big push inland, actually. To date, most of that has been coastal. So most of our designations and most of our certified individuals to date historically have been in coastal areas. So places like North and South Carolina, Alabama, where we've got our largest footprint of fortified homes. Louisiana is our fastest growing market in that coastal area. So that's been where a bulk of them have been. However, we are starting to see, again, as I mentioned, lots more storms happening inland. Lots of states are wanting to see more resilient construction happening. And so we are seeing an uptick in inland areas. And, we can go down this path in a moment. I'll let you figure out where we want to put it. But we do have a growing number of states that are actually providing grants to homeowners to incentivize them to re-roof to fortified, just to help make the existing housing stock a bit stronger.
That's a fascinating topic. We may go down here in just a moment, but so let's talk. Fortified's been around for a while now. Have we seen the impact of the fortification in hurricane zones or in hail zones, in tornado zones, whatever, where you've got a home that's fortified next to one that's not, and we see the difference after the fact?
Yes, absolutely. Primarily in hurricane zones thus far, because our biggest footprint has been in those hurricane zones. We're just now starting to see a growing number in like inland Alabama, for example. So we don't have a lot of like direct impacts for hail and high wind in those areas yet on homes. We do have a couple of small examples for tornadoes that had gone through and homes did quite well. But we do have some really good data that came out of some hurricanes, particularly in the North Carolina coast and the Alabama Gulf Coast, where we had quite a big footprint of fortified that was impacted. And there's actually a study that went out on Hurricane Sally, where we had 17,000 homes that were in the path of fortified homes in the path of Sally. And so that was our biggest test to date, where we actually had real world impacts. And Sally was a very wet, very slow, even though it was only a Cat 2, which I know for hurricane folks, that's not necessarily a big storm, but it did do it rained and it blew for a very long time. And so it was a really good test for fortified roofs in coastal Alabama. And they did very, very well. Great successes there.
Is it a word of mouth kind of thing? I see that house next door did really well. As I'm rebuilding or building from scratch, I need to have my home like that one.
So interestingly, after Sally, there was a lot of that. We had thousands more. We had this sort of surge after Hurricane Sally where people saw exactly what you just said, where people had fortified roofs, their neighbors did not. A lot of their neighbors were moving out of their homes because they had so much damage of water intrusion that they were living in their RVs in their front yards, or even some of their neighbors were housing them because they just, they had too much water come in and they had to gut their homes. So yes, there was a lot of that. And that really helps to expand the number of fortified homes in coastal Alabama after Sally, for sure.
How much more does it cost me when I build my home to make it fortified? What's the cost?
Yeah, so it depends a lot on what your baseline code is that's being enforced. Because code makes a big difference, and code, it does very well. And so, and there's a lot of components of fortified that are actually already in code. So it does depend on that. Now, for example, in most Gulf Coast area or most coastal areas, there's already some sort of a code that's being enforced. So that number is pretty small, especially to get to fortified roof. I mean, we're talking probably maybe a 10% increase. So if you're looking at that let's just use $15,000 roof, 10% is $1,500. So it's not a huge chunk of a new roof if you're re-roofing. And we generally see for an average 2,000 square foot home, that's probably about what you're talking about. For fortified gold, it can be a little bit higher depending again on the code. Most code areas allow plywood for opening protection for shutter systems. They'll allow plywood. We don't. We require that it actually be a tested and approved system or a impact window. So that's probably the biggest chunk that would be the price increase. And that can be upwards of 1% to 3% over normal construction costs for a new built gold home. So it's still not a huge number, but it can be a little bit higher for new construction, primarily because of those opening protection means or pieces.
Are you finding that impacts the resale value of the home as well? We can say I'm fortified. Your home is worth more than the one next door just because you're going to withstand the storm.
Yeah, so there's actually a study there too. We have the University of Alabama did both of these studies, the Sally study that I referred to just a moment ago, but they also did a value study and focusing on coastal Alabama where we had a pretty large footprint. In that area, fortified homes were actually, on average, saw about a 7% increase in value. The closer you got to the coast, the higher that got. So that's in a market that's really, I would refer to that as flipped. It's people are aware of it. They're asking for it. You almost can't sell a house here unless it's fortified in Alabama. In other areas, they may not see that value right away. I think where there's some value is when folks can afford insurance, or where there's way more insurance options that are more affordable and attainable, then we do see where those homes may sell faster just because somebody can get insurance in these homes where others may not. So it's, it depends market to market really, what that looks like right now.
So let's bring this down to the guy who's just gone through a storm and his home was fortified and the one next door wasn't. Talk about the experience after the storm for the fortified home person, what their experience, how theirs is different from somebody who is in a home that wasn't fortified. You mentioned,
sure.
Talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, we had, I'm thinking of a very clear example of that. It was in Gulf Shores, Alabama. They got, pretty much a direct hit. Again, that fortified home stood strong. Their roof was intact. So they had cleanup like everyone else, but they were able to stay in their house. They were hot like everyone else. They didn't have power, but they were able to just get to work and clean up their yard and stay in their home, sleep in their bed that night. Neighbors, not so much. They were moving. I remember this vision that will never leave. They were moving their stuff out in Rubbermaid bins and putting them into pods in their yard. And they were not able to sleep in their bed that night. And I mean, that's a really stark contrast. And the guy that had the fortified roof, literally, he had neighbors sleeping on the floor of his living room because, they couldn't sleep in their house because they got so much water in. And all their stuff was now either on the side of the road in some instances, or moved out in pods, the stuff that they could gather that was not affected. So it was really, really, it was a stark contrast for sure.
Clearly, you see why insurance and reinsurance is so interested in all of this and the research that you're doing. But you never know what's going to motivate somebody, right? Whether it's the money to replace it, the time out of their home, the inconvenience. You just never know what's going to motivate someone to take that first step. So what is that first step? If I'm somebody who's sitting in a home that I'm not going to move anytime soon, but I want to make my home more storm ready, whether it's hurricane, hail, wildfire, whatever, what is that first step?
Yeah, so if somebody, let's talk about, I'll sort of separate into camps. If somebody's interested in wanting to do fortified and they're sitting in their existing home, if they need a new roof, that is a prime time, especially pre-storm. I know, I hear it all the time. Well, that's what insurance is for, but they're not thinking about that, that displacement. They're not thinking about the disruption. They're not thinking about there's a pretty sizable deductible that goes along with that, right? So there's a lot of pieces that aren't necessarily in people's minds when they think about, oh, insurance will replace my roof. It'll be fine. So that's the first one, is that if you're ready to re-roof, do it now. And make sure it's fortified, because that will, we've seen directly how that affects folks. If you're not, if you're not in that place right now where you can re-roof, there's a lot of other stuff you can do. I mentioned we had that hurricane ready guide. Trees is a big one. Simply taking down some of the limbs that might be overhanging your house, or the dead trees or the pine tree that's sort of been looming and dropping limbs. Get rid of that stuff, because that, again, that's a more costly, a less costly thing that you can do right now that will help, prevent some things. Clean out your gutters, seal up cracks, all of that, kind of simple stuff. Pick up the debris in your yard, clean out your garage so you can put all of your stuff that's in your yard in it when there's a storm and your car. All of those things can make a very big difference on the kinds of damage that you might see at your location. So, yeah.
Let's take a quick break and talk about our sponsors, and we'll come back because I've got a few more questions I want to ask you before we wrap up today. So I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors who make these shows a reality week in and week out. USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, and LiveView. I want to focus just briefly on LiveView. When we're at the National Tropical Weather Conference on South Padre Island every year, broadcasters come from all over the nation to learn from folks like Alex and everybody else who's there. Bill Reed is there, and Phil Klotzbach is there. there, and Brian Norcross is there, and all these folks are really, the experts, Jamie Rome, and just all kinds of people like that. And they want to share that information with their viewers back home. And the way they do that is through LiveView, and LiveView provides that live link from the National Tropical Weather Conference back to home stations for our broadcasters all around the country, so they can share what they've learned with their viewers back home. And LiveView provides that, and we appreciate them for being an active part of what we do at the National Tropical Weather Conference. So thanks to LiveView for that. Okay, let's get back. We're talking to Alexandra Cary. Alejandro's behind the scenes back there. You mentioned the checklist. I know there's one on the website, and Alex Garcia, I don't know if you could pull that up, the checklist for hurricanes, for all the different hazards, things we can do. We were talking about that before the quick break. Those checklists, I was just looking through them, and they're really comprehensive. There's a lot of good information there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that homeowners can do, even if they're not planning to make any significant changes to their home right now. So we really do encourage folks to look at those. If you're in a coastal area, look at those hurricane ready guides. If you're in inland areas, we have the thunderstorm ready guides. All of those things have valuable information. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier, just addressing potential roof problems if you have them and you're able to do that right now, getting a fortified roof, trimming limbs and taking care of trees that might be of a risk to your house. I mentioned garage doors earlier. That's another big one. That's something that folks can do also. It's, if you've got the means to do it, I highly recommend. If you don't know if your garage door is pressure rated, then that would be an investment that is well worth it, and could mean that, whether your house it actually survives an event or not. So those are a lot of the things folks can do now.
I say this right as the garbage truck pulls up outside my window, so you may hear the background noise back there. Apologize for that. But in our industry, on the broadcast side of things, we're constantly battling misinformation. Yes. Folks who we call them meteorologists, who are putting out information that just really isn't factual. Do you battle the same thing? And if so, how do you deal with that? People that are just putting out information that's not right.
Yeah, it definitely happens, and I think it's just the nature of humans, right? Is they hear something or get something in their mind, and then that stuff spreads somehow more quickly than the good stuff sometimes. So yeah, and sometimes that's as simple as like that. Fortified is just so expensive. In hurricane areas, you have to have an impact rated roof, and that's just so expensive. So all these various things, but we really try to help folks understand that there's Fortified is available really at any price point, and there are ways that you can get that done for pretty affordable ways. So I think that's probably the biggest one. That I hear most often, as well as, sometimes there's some more involved technical things that people get wrong.
Yes, absolutely. So where's IBHS headed? What is coming up? What's down the road for what you guys are doing?
So in the fortified space, a lot of it is really growing inland. We'd like to, we have a growing number of states, even in inland areas. I mentioned the grant programs that are really growing across the country. The Alabama had the first one, which was a retrofit program for existing homeowners to re-roof to fortified. Louisiana, North Carolina both have very robust programs and are doing thousands of homes per year to get them, fortified roofs, which really we know at this point prevents a lot of damage. So we've got inland states such as Minnesota and Kentucky and Arkansas and Tennessee. All of those states are looking to grow grant programs, to establish grant programs. Oklahoma actually just launched theirs earlier this year. So grant programs are really big right now, and we're trying to support those states to give them, allow them to launch successful programs. Maine's another. We've got the Northeast is really a growing market for grant programs right now. In the fire space, we've similarly, we've got a lot of states that are facing some serious fire risks. So we've seen a real growth in our wildfire prepared home program as well. We've got 2 programs for that. There's 3. We have folks that can do wildfire prepared on their existing homes. We've got a wildfire prepared plus that is ideal for new construction, where people can apply some of those standards while they're building. And then we've got a community program that we also just launched. So a lot going on, especially in the western states around fire, and some of those places are looking at grant programs as well.
Fascinating to know the work that you guys are doing and how important and impactful it is on anybody and everybody. So, if I'm sitting home, I can't join IBHS, but you're a great resource for anybody really. If you're a homeowner, no matter where you live, it's a great resource.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all that info, as I mentioned, is free and on our website. So in the near term, look at those ready guides. If you're not ready to do, something bigger to your home, like re-roof or get a new garage door, check out those ready guides. And then if you're re-roofing, definitely stuff you can do there with Fortified, and then building new. That's a huge opportunity. Starting from scratch is always the least expensive way to get some of this stuff done, for sure.
I found that I told you the one certified, or the roofer in my area. I live 70 miles from the coast. There's not one closer to the coast, which I think is interesting. The nearest one is this far inland, but they cover the whole area. But I just find that interesting that there's nobody in Brownsville, which is 20 miles from the coast. But,
yeah. But maybe that's a sign, Tim. That's good news.
We're going to put them all to work. Do you have any thoughts you want to leave us with? We can wrap this up, but if there's thoughts you'd like to leave us with today, something we haven't touched on that you want to talk about, we've still got some time if you'd like.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things. One, if you don't see someone in your area from Fortified perspective, that doesn't mean that you still can't get it done. We can still work with you. We've got to contact us on the website. So if you're interested, if you have a contractor or a roofer that you already work with, we can help them too. Like we'll help them. All of the resources are online, so we can either give them the training information. We've got a whole website where we can train folks online, as I mentioned. So that's available to contractors nationally. So I would say that would be one, fortifiedhome.org, and you can access all that good stuff, both the professional resources as well as some homeowner resources, and then the ibhs.org where you guys can find, everybody can find good information. We also have the studies, we have those studies that I referred to earlier that came out of the University of Alabama. Really good stuff there too. The value study as well as the Sally study that really reflects how well Fortify's been doing out there. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to share the information with folks. We want people to be able to survive the next disaster in their homes, be able to stay in their homes. So appreciate this opportunity.
We all are doing great work, and thank you for all that you do. We appreciate that. I am going to go to South Carolina one of these days. I drove.
Yes, you're welcome to. Let's talk.
I want to see. I was within about 30 miles of the facility just a couple of months ago. So I was doing a cross country trip, and I was like, I want to go, but I didn't have time on that trip. But we're going to make it work one of these days.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
All right, Alex, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us today. Great information, and I think everybody that's watching can take something from this, and hopefully at least those who watch this will be a little better off next time some kind of disaster or severe weather event affects their area. Thank you, Alex. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tim.
All right, that wraps it up for today. We really appreciate you all being with us today. Our program next week is going to be Dr. Jennifer Collins, Laura Myers, and Nadia Blomendahl. A hurricane rating scale, a new concept. That'll be interesting, what they're thinking about there. So that'll be next week. In the meantime, let's thank our sponsors once again: USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Boy Weather Company, and LiveView, all folks who make these programs a reality week in and week out. Thanks for being with us today. Special thanks to Alex for her great input today, and Alex Garcia back in the control room. Thank you for making it work. We'll see you next week for NTWC Plus.